afternoon. Could I have everyone take their seats, please? If we can get everyone in here and situated and take their seats. Thank you for joining us. Before the program starts today, we just have a few housekeeping details to take care of. We are streaming this
Thank you, Michelle. I'm Mary Scott, and I have the great pleasure to be the chairman of the Board of Governors for the National Military Family Association. I would like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us at this 2013 leadership event. It is wonderful to see you all. You are all friends, many long time, some new, but we know you are all interested in cybersecurity and, of course, in providing the best support possible for military families. Most of you know firsthand the powerful economic pressure on all of our organizations. These are compounded in the military community by the staggering effect of sequestration, but as we know, from difficulty springs innovation. Our association realized that we need to be more innovative to continue to serve military families at the same high level of quality in this tight budget climate. We asked ourselves how we could be more effective and ultimately how we could serve more military families. So this year, we're exploring a new event format. This is it. We want to let military families throughout the country in on what we're talking about today. We're streaming the event, as I think you know, live for those who cannot be here. Afterwards, we'll send video clips of the discussion throughout our military community and through other channels to ensure that as many military families as possible benefit from the wisdom of General Michael Hayden and Mr. Kevin Mandia. This is, of course, all made possible by generous sponsors. I'd like to particularly thank and acknowledge Major General Andrew Eglund and his board of directors of the Association of Military Banks of America. Andy, would you please stand? We are so grateful to Andy for his continuing and stalwart support of our association and military families everywhere, and for allowing us to be innovative, as we must be in this challenging climate and as we put on this leadership event. I'd also like to thank and ask you to note each of the sponsors that are on our panels here, including Zyders Enterprises and Spectrum Healthcare Resources. There were any number of organizations that they might support this year, and they invested in us, and we are very grateful for that. In just a moment, we will launch our first live-streamed event, and we're glad that you're here with us. Panel has arrived.
Hello.
Welcome to the National Military Family Association's annual leadership event. I'm Mary Scott, the pleasure to be the chairman of the Board of Governors for the association. This year, we're highlighting something that affects all Americans and indeed all citizens of the world. And this is the balance between the many conveniences and benefits of internet and other cyber use versus the potential risks, from individuals to organizations to the nation. What are these threats? Are military families particularly vulnerable? It's part of our charity's mission to strengthen and protect military families, so we turn to our friends and global experts for their help. The Association of Military Banks of America knows firsthand how critical financial cybersecurity is to the military families it serves. Their association offered to sponsor this event, thank you, Andy, so we could ensure that military families take the steps necessary to stay cyber safe in financial and all areas of their lives. Appcelerator, Agility Corporation, and Wallman Optical quickly added their support, along with these other fine organizations and generous sponsors who are listed here. We are very grateful to these sponsors. We then approached top-notch experts because military families make tremendous sacrifices for the nation, and they deserve the best possible advice and information. General Michael Hayden, a member of our own board of advisors, and Mr. Kevin Mandia, one of the country's top cyber sleuths, quickly offered their help. General Hayden is former director of both the National Security Agency and Central Intelligence Agency. And Mr. Kevin Mandia is founder and chief executive officer of Mandiant, a company that focuses on helping organizations detect, respond to, and contain computer intrusions. He served as cybercrime investigator in the Air Force and directed security consulting divisions of various companies, including Foundstone, a division of McAfee. Mr. Mandia has contributed to the cybersecurity curricula of the FBI, Secret Service, Air Force, and other U.S. government agencies. Most recently, he was recognized by exposing the Chinese for hacking into many of the United States' largest organizations. It is with great pride and pleasure I now turn this discussion over to General Hayden and Mr. Mandia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think the first thing we've got to point out that we're actually pretty good friends. We're both Steeler fans. Kevin predicted 4 wins this year. I predicted 12. We're both going to be wrong, but he's going to be closer to being right than I was.
That's true.
Okay. Kevin, Mary already mentioned your background, but I'd like to ask you a little bit. So you began this in the Air Force.
Yeah, I did. I started my career in the Air Force in 1993 at a building called the Pentagon. And what was interesting is about 3 months after I got there, I took what I called at the time the least bad of 6 decisions. I chose computer security officer. And 3 months after I got there, we put our first eyes on the network, what we called the Automated Security Incident Measurement Tool, which was a fancy way of saying we watched what people were doing on the network. Started doing that, but what's interesting and applicable today too is later in my career I cross-trained from computer security officer into the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. And during that time frame, that was right as the internet started really emerging. And just like good folks use the internet, the underbelly uses the internet as well. So we were uniquely positioned, quite frankly, to see how bad guys use the internet, not just in computer intrusions, but in other unlawful activities. And quite frankly, you can take any crime, any criminal activity, and you'll usually find an internet component to it. So
you stayed in the Air Force how long?
Not long enough. Wish I was still doing it. So no, I stayed in for 5.5 years and enjoyed every minute of it.
And you went into the private sector, carried over some of the activities you had while in uniform?
Oh, absolutely.
Tell us about
absolutely.
Mandiant.
So when I left the military, one of the things that I observed is at the time, it was government intrusions against government entities. It felt that way. So as I responded to incidents in the late 90s, you could feel, I don't want to call them adversaries, our competimates in the world, where it was government to government, and it kind of seemed fair. But right as I was getting out of the military, I started seeing some activities that looked like government activities against non-government entities here in the private sector. In 2004, I started Mandiant with a very, it sounds like a fear, uncertainty, and doubt tagline, but I started Mandiant with the theme, security breaches are inevitable. And everybody just goes, oh, that's so defeatist. But at the end of the day, I feel it's inevitable that Tom Brady will complete a pass in a football game, much in the same way if a good attacker wants to target you, they can be successful. And it is, right now you can get sucker punched in cyberspace. So I don't mean to have a defeatist attitude about it. Security breaches are inevitable. That doesn't mean they happen every day. That doesn't mean it's automatically going to happen against the energy sector. But over time, your security gap grows and decreases as an enterprise and even as an individual. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly where that gap is at any one time that someone targets you. So your risk profiles can change. And that's what I mean by that. And it's turned out to be true. As right now, just the state of cybersecurity in our country, and really with the products and the people that we use to secure our networks, if somebody is very good at attacking computer networks, they're simply going to win and get in. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm sure we'll go into it. So I started a company to respond to every incident that matters because A, it's fun. B, there was an absolute need for it. And C, let's know what the bad guys are up to. And the best way to do that is get in the trenches and fight them every day. And that's what we do.
Okay, so you and I are both airmen. We both kind of shared a heritage in the 90s of the thinking that was going on at Security Hill in San Antonio at the Air Intelligence Agency. The Air Force is kind of on point inside the American government for thinking of cyber as a domain. We do this little drill, land, sea, air, space, cyber. I was in front of Black Hat in Las Vegas 3 or 4 summers ago. So the ballroom at Caesar's Palace filled with about 3,500 reformed or not so much reformed hackers. And I go, land, sea, air, space, cyber. I know who made these, and he was pretty good. And I think I know who did this one, and you messed it up. Why is this domain so advantaged to the offense and to the attacker?
Wow, lots of reasons. But I can tell you a couple. One, well, I'll tell you two. It's an asymmetrical theater, for one, because one bad guy who targets the U.S. financial services can make work for 300,000 defenders. It's just an unfair fight. Second is, as a defender of a network or defender of a home or defender of your enterprise, you have to make sure all your computers are not vulnerable. All your computers are secure. And the bad guy only has to hack into one of them. So imagine the job of, I have 400,000 machines at Defense Industrial Base Company. I got to protect them all. And the bad guy's just looking for one crack. It's an unfair fight right now.
All right, you and I have talked before. We kind of have our own taxonomy that we agree on is, okay, this is an unsafe domain. All advantage goes to the attacker. Obviously, it's a very empowering domain. It's why you and I are in it. It's why you and I make use of it. I tell audiences sometimes, I'm old enough to remember that I had to get in the car, drive to a building, and talk to a human being to get my money. Okay? And now none of us ever do that. So this domain is really empowering, but there are forces of darkness out there. And you and I agree on the taxonomy of the forces of darkness. So let's start at the top, and I want to ask you a few questions about each category.
Sure.
Okay. The first force is the one you saw when you were in the Air Force, nation states.
Right.
What are they doing? And why don't you talk a little bit about that building in Shanghai you dimed out in your white paper?
Okay. Well, no question, at the top level of the food chain, I mean, the best at it, you know, I call it the amoeba defense, the Ravens defense of 2000. Wait, except I'm talking offense now, is the nation states. And it's real hard to keep them out. Very targeted. I can tell you the trends I've observed in that over time. Back in the 90s, when we defended networks, all we did is we defended computers themselves. That's just the way it was. Make sure that our systems that are on the internet were secure. What changed sometime around 1998, 1999 is everybody started living their lives online. There started being Facebook, email online, the ability to start texting, chatting, LinkedIn, all these ways to see the fabric and weave of how people are related. The attack started to change in 1998, and I saw it. The nation states that attacked us to try to get into our infrastructure and steal our intellectual property recognized, well, let's target people. And the two reasons why that's successful were the servers were starting to get secured. Our standards, legislation, and regulations in the United States pushed our security benchmarks up a little bit. But what happened is people started getting less secure. And I can tell you right now, the majority of the folks I meet, if I get your name, I can cyber stalk you, which I don't do. I'm not going to run home and do it. But I end up, there was one person that didn't answer a phone call I made years ago. I called somebody. I was like, I really need to talk to this guy. And he wouldn't answer my phone calls. So I used him as the example when I trained the FBI on how to cyber stalk. Because every case begins with, hey, let's find out as much as we can about people. And you can find people's favorite movies, the movie they saw 3 days ago, the name of their dog, what they're going to buy their kids for Christmas before Christmas even happens, all online. It's fantastic for the bad guy because they can target you, come up with a ruse that will simply work, and that's how they've been breaking in. So the nation states operate at that level. And it's odd. You'd think, why would a nation state with people in uniform target you personally to break into your entity? But that's exactly how they do it nowadays. Very personalized attacks.
Well, you came to my class at GMU, and you said that, I mean, forensically, I mean, just looking at the crime scene,
Sure.
which is what Mandiant does. Forensically, you were discovering that fewer and fewer attackers are using the exploit,
Yes.
and they're now using social engineering
That
to,
is-
to turn
absolutely.
you into the weapon.
You hack yourselves. Isn't that amazing? And I can tell you the number one way, and it does happen in the criminal elements, which I know we'll get to, the nation states, the way they compromise individuals is they send you an email or a Skype message with an attachment, and that attachment will be a Word document, Excel document, PowerPoint document, or a PDF document. That's the hack du jour. And it'll actually be a document that's relevant to your life because you were targeted. So if you're interested in, say, constellations or something, and you're posting online, boy, I'd like to learn more about Osiris. I don't even know if that's a constellation, by the way. I'm going with it. Yeah, Orion. I know that's a constellation. I'm interested in Orion. This guy would, you might just get a PDF. Here's a thing about Orion and why it got its name and how it's shaped. You get very targeted things. And just open, you don't get hacked by opening just the email, by the way. And you don't get hacked by just reading the Skype. But by opening the attachment, you are using features in your computer to compromise yourself. So that's what I mean. It's a human vulnerability. I want to read this document. Click, click, boom. You just got compromised.
I know of one instance that Kevin is aware as well, where a small company, on an American holiday, several of the leaders, it's a small company, so everyone knows each other by first name, got an email, ostensibly from the financial officer in this company. The title was Draft Quarterly Report. The text said, looking good, check it out, we'll talk tomorrow. And then there was a hyperlink. Okay. And by the way, the guy from whom it was the CFO, at least in the from box. Now, when you look behind the from box and actually looked at the email address, it wasn't. And as Kevin well knows, it was Chinese. It was a very sophisticated Chinese attack that picked the holiday Monday when you weren't in the office. Everyone's going in different directions. It was about the time of the quarterly report. It was from the person whom we would expect to send that to us. And it was about the money. We were all interested in clicking on to see how we were doing. And that's turning us into our own hacker. Yeah.
And you never get it down to zero. So for those of you that fell for a spear phishing attack, don't feel bad about it. That being said, if you fell for it while swiping on your iPad, that's good, because right now we're not seeing those droppers or the hacks work on the iPads.
Okay, so nation states out there
Sure, yep.
doing bad things. The next group I put on my list are criminal gangs. All right, criminal elements, in my sense, mostly in the post-Soviet space. So we're talking Belarus and Ukraine and the Caucasus and Central Asia and Eastern Europe. I mentioned this once at a gathering downtown with Yevgeny Kaspersky, who is kind of the Russian Kevin Mandia, okay? And probably as good friends with former intelligence chiefs in Russia as Kevin is in the United States. And I talked about these criminal gangs, and he made it quite clear that they're kind of surrogates for the Russian state, that they're not just guns for hire for criminal activities, that there are some states who will go out and use them as cutouts so that they can achieve things the state wants to achieve. So what about the gangs? How good are they?
I think they're real good. So we always say the nation states are the best because they can be resourced appropriately, and that's their day job. If your day job is to badge in at 8 a.m. and hack a U.S. company till 6 p.m., you're going to get in sooner or later. The criminals, because it's monetarily motivated, generally target, I've seen a shift recently, which means they're probably getting hired. I'd say they're technically down a notch. There's an exception to it, but they target the banks and the retailers. It's targeting, can I get primary account numbers so I can go make money? So at least it doesn't hit the whole world. When we talk nation states, I can't tell you an industry left out of the target list. It's from schools to brick and mortar firms to the companies that make soft drinks on down. I mean, it's everybody. Aerospace, telecommunications. When you get to the criminal aspect, I think you get the industries down to retail, banks, and for some reason, video game companies. And that's where I've seen some of the most advanced attacks. And that's just like a little enclave of special sophistication. But that's where they operate, one rung down, I'd say, from the nation states. That being said, pretty portable attacks if you wanted to cross borders.
Okay, governments, criminal elements. There's a third group. I'm gonna slap the label, the disaffected on them, but there could be a lot of other descriptions. How dangerous are they?
Well, I think they are dangerous for a couple of reasons. Because at the nation state level, if you've been compromised by a nation state, here's the good news. They're not going to brag about it online. They're not going to tell the world. And for a private sector company, it's nice to not have that disclosure problem. The problem with the disenchanted, I guess, disenfranchised, all the dis
Mad at the world.
Yeah, mad at the world, don't like people. And some of the examples, a group like Anonymous, loosely formed hacking group that hacked a lot of companies and made a public spectacle of these intrusions, meaning they brought your problems into the limelight. And that makes it very damaging. At the same time frame, what we're witnessing now is groups that are loosely organized that might be pro-Assad in Syria. For example, there's a group called the Syrian Electronic Army, and I've seen press reports that say, oh, they're not that sophisticated. And whether or not the Syrian Electronic Army is working for Assad directly or not is actually immaterial, because I think the end results are the same. And I'll give you just a little detail on an attack they did, because I saw a report as not sophisticated, but we had the privilege of responding to the Syrian Electronic Army compromise some companies. And as I did the compromise investigations, I was thinking, how would you have stopped this? So I just want to share with you the attack, because you can see the ingenuity behind these people. And should we have had armed conflict in Syria, I'm very convinced that the rules of engagement by the Syrian Electronic Army would have changed from just mere, what I'd call attractive nuisances to perhaps more damaging. But very quickly, the way they did the attack is they attacked the media. And many of you may have seen in April of this year, the Twitter account for the Associated Press was hijacked by the Syrian Electronic Army, and they tweeted, Obama, they didn't say President Obama, so I'm being exact here. Obama was injured in a White House explosion, and the stock fell 120 points or something like that, so Obama now knows he's worth billions. So, and then it pops back up. But the way they did an attack like that, very briefly, was that the Syrian Electronic Army, when they broke in, the Syrian Electronic Army is over here, they sent a spear phishing email to approximately 10 folks at a media company.
Remind everybody what spear phishing.
Spear phishing is a fake email. You're purporting to be somebody that you're not, and the content is a ruse to get someone to do something. Click on a link or open up a document. So they sent this email to 10 folks, and the email was purporting to come from someone in the United Nations. So remember, this email is going to a reporter from the United Nations, and it's saying, here's, you need to read this article in the Washington Post about a certain topic. Now, everybody that got this email, when they click on the link to see this Washington Post report, where they were really going is to what's called a mirrored site, a website that's a mirror of a real site, of the Outlook web access, or the web access to email for this media company. I hope that makes sense. So to the unwitting victim, they're like, hey, I'm in an email. Oh, I got an email from the United Nations about something. Let me click on this link. And the person in UN really existed, by the way, so they did a research. Click on this link. And what they got was a new login back into their email. So they're in their email, and their conclusion was, hey, I just got kicked out of my email. Why is that? So they typed in their user ID and password and logged back into email, but what they were really doing is giving the Syrian Electronic Army at the mirrored site that email. Now everybody thinks, so what? But here's what they did next, and it took them under 10 minutes, by the way, to get an account that worked. Then the Syrian Electronic Army can now log into the real email accounts, and the real problem with this isn't that they tweeted something. It's that they now know the contact list of all the Syrian rebels that are emailing the Western reporters, because we saw them prove that. So that's a real problem. Is that a non-fancy attack? I don't know. It worked.
Yeah.
It worked in 10 minutes. So I think they can do a lot more than that.
I think the Syrian Electronic Army is an extension of the Iranian state. And you've got an awful lot of Iranian military in Syria. You've got Hezbollah supported by the Iranians in Syria. The Iranians themselves, we know, have been active against American banks, right?
That's true.
What have they done?
I like how you asked the questions. Well, let me tell you what you could say, but I'll say it instead. Okay. I do know that last year, and here's the upside. Last year I got a phone call late at night. I answered the phone, and normally when you answer the phone, there's one person on the other line. But I answered the phone, there's 3 banks and a bunch of FBI guys on the line. And what was neat about that is that meant the government knew the attacks were coming. I don't know how, I don't care. But it was the Iranians trying to it's the fundamental equivalent, it's called a denial of service attack. But it's a fundamental equivalent of let's all call 911 right now and report emergencies and just keep calling 911. You will flood the lines and the police won't be able to respond. Someone in Iran was planning very smart attacks, and it was very overwhelming, but we're very good at moving around this. They did denial of service attacks against their primary money center banks. But the banks knew ahead of time because it started trickling in and somebody figured it out. So we can withstand that. But that's, we've witnessed this throughout our careers. In 1998, bad guys did denial of service attacks, so we learned how to fix them. The bad guys that did denial of service attacks will rapidly go to other forms of attacks. So the Iranians absolutely led that denial of service attack. It shows that they're willing to operate in cyber, and we're waiting for their next steps. And we've seen them since then do other things.
North Koreans dangerous?
They don't like us.
And they've attacked South Korea?
That is true. I don't know the particulars on that, but it's definitely been said there are operations in North Korea against South Korea. And I think the drawn conclusion is anytime there's an armed conflict at this point, there will be a cyber component to that armed conflict.
And obviously the South Koreans, if the South Korean internet is attacked by North Korea, then the South Koreans can respond in kind and take down the North Korean internet, right?
Yeah, who knows? That's why asymmetrical.
There is no North Korean internet.
Yeah, you got to wonder where they got the few
And why
machines.
what this has done, this cyber domain, where we've decided to put in ones and zeros, things you and I used to keep in a safe or at least in our desk drawer, it empowers the people who do not have inherent power.
Absolutely.
It pushes the ability to do harm down below nation states, through criminal gangs, into individuals, or even into very poor, relatively unsophisticated, unscientific nation states, and it's a great leveler. You and I were talking before we came on about how this domain is really useful for military families, and you and I were talking about, back in the day, trying to send emails home from a deployed location and what that meant and so on. But you also agree that those communications of military families who have peculiar situations that might actually make them more vulnerable than the average American family, those communications are fair game, and I don't mean fair in the way we generally mean fair, but there will be people going after them. So one, how dangerous is it, and what ought you to do?
Well, I'm paranoid, but that's okay. When I thought about this presentation that we're going to do here today, one of the things I kept thinking about is what's unique to military families is the stress of being apart all the time. And obviously there's a lot more stress because you're in theaters of war. So 2 things need to happen. One, you want to have as much communication as you can if you're a forward deployed soldier, man or woman, back with the family. And that communication, you want it to be as safe as it can be. Second thing you want, though, is the ability, if you're remote parenting, you feel such a sense of loss of control as to the safety of perhaps your children or your spouse. And you may want to be able to do some monitoring there. So one of the things I prepped was how do you securely communicate, or at least do your best, and then how can you do remote parenting outside of that communication? And then that's, there's a fine line between really, really spying on your kids, because there's never been a better time to spy on your kids than right now. And what are they doing as we sit here? And versus how much you trust them. But remember, when you're forward deployed, or you're in another theater, you don't get the nonverbal communication and daily interactions with your children. And I think that's got to be an unbelievable amount of stress and strain. So you want me to go into this?
Yeah, so how do you do it?
I know you know the answer. On the secure communications, I just feel, having looked at them, and we're always trying to tap communications, and we've seen how bad guys surreptitiously communicate on the internet, so we can borrow from that. I truly believe Skype is a very secure mode of communication for the forward deployed soldier. I just do. You get the video. It's very hard to untangle Skype video and Skype chat. It just is. It's an encrypted communication. It does get stored somewhere though, but it's a little bit better than email, because email just bounces around a bunch of servers, but at least they have the .mil accounts, and I still believe if the military is providing a means to communicate, use it, because the military will think of the ways to do that and to do it securely and safely. So if the military is telling you to do something, do it. But as I've observed in the private sector, Skype is still just a good way to do it. Sit on an iPad, chat with your family on Skype. Down here, how the parent, one of the things I did before this presentation was, I probably shouldn't have, but I did, but my kids are too young to surf, I think. And, but I looked at what you can control at the wireless access points nowadays, and it's remarkable. What I mean by that is most of you have a wireless environment at home. So let's talk about that. Don't be afraid of the administrative interface into that wireless access point to configure it. What I mean is you can be a forward deployed soldier, and you can pick selected sites, selected strings, and if anybody in your house goes to those things, you get an email. It's pretty powerful. That means you don't have to log in from 3,000 miles away into your wireless access point, which is not easy to do, quite frankly, and figure out what's going on. But you get an email to you, and you can have it trigger on specific sites as well. So if you have teenagers and they're going out to sites, quite frankly, you can know it all if they're on the wireless access point. That being said, do you want to? So, but these things are unbelievably powerful, and they can firewall, and what I mean by firewall is you can pick what they can do. Can they just browse, or can they go to file sharing? I wrote down some specifics, but you know, if you've got you know, no question you want to educate your children specifically. If you're going to forward deploy, tell your children, you know, don't, a couple things. Never put your full name out on the internet if you can help it, quite frankly. You don't want your account information out there. If you're going to do Facebook, you don't have to use your name. I don't have to have a Facebook page, Kevin Mandia at Facebook. I could pick some neat thing like Grape Slurpee and be that guy, you know, and then at least it's not quite my name. Home address is good to keep off of that. You know, I look at senior officers, you don't want your home address on there, you don't want social security number, you don't want your passwords, names of other family members. You may even want to tell other family members that you don't want pictures of your family going online. And I'll tell you something about that, because this was a big challenge with one of the major, I think it was Facebook. The privacy rules, when they change, you may have a picture on your Facebook wall. And if the privacy rules change, that picture can now be used at their will and whims, not yours. And that's amazing, so that's retroactive. So when your kids put pictures online, realize that even when you mark private in some of these social sites, private may not mean that much. It might mean who can view it, but at the same time frame, ownership of that picture may have just transferred to the site you're posting it to. So just a couple of things, and then I leave you with a thought. I mean, I could go on forever on this stuff, and I don't want to, but I can tell you the permanence is something you should absolutely tell your spouse and your children, because the permanence of what goes out on the internet is virtually impossible to pull back. It really is. And we're going to learn that with things like WikiLeaks and Snowden. Oh, you can't rein it back in when it goes out to the internet. Your photos, the dialogue, all that stuff can live forever once it goes out there.
You had some figures about
they were
folks.
They were depressing though, so I put them away.
Go ahead.
Well, what I looked at is just the underbelly figures. You know, how many children feel cyberbullying and what to do about it. I don't know how exact these are, but I did live this. In the early onset of cybercrime, when I was an Air Force OSI agent, one of the most common crimes was trying to get teenagers to travel and meet people. No matter what, obviously, the FBI and everybody recommends you never, ever travel to meet someone you met online without firearms and a suit of armor. No, I'm just kidding. I had lots of friends. But you know, I'm sure there's exceptions to every rule, but I mean, I would draw the line for anybody under a certain age. But some of the stats that we saw were that at this point they were saying about 10% of all youths, meaning under 18, receive a solicitation online, and this is 3 years old. So 10%-ish, 3 years old. My gut tells me it's over 25%, Because a lot of times, even when I just open up Skype, I'll get a message and I'm just like, who is this? There's bots or robots or automatic programs out there constantly pinging people in Skype and other types of protocols to lure teenagers, quite frankly, into doing something, or getting involved in some kind of groups. 27%, and this is let me look at the exact year this came out, 27 in 2008, 27% solicitors asked youths for sexual photographs of themselves. So that's 10% you got asked, and then 27% of the time if you fell for the bait. And then I'll just leave you with another stat that shocked me and depressed me. Mayors are doing sexting, I think, or mayor candidates are doing it. And then nearly 15% of our high school students are sexting right now, which to me shows pretty interesting judgment, maybe called poor judgment, because the minute you do that, that picture can go anywhere. And you're relying on magic to keep it from doing so.
You have young children.
I just got depressed.
Yeah, but you do have young
I
children.
may or may not have young children. Following my own security rules. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I do.
If you had young children,
If I did, hypothetically,
tell us about the education and training regimen you would put young children through to make them cyber smart and cyber safe. And I mean, begin at when they first start swiping and
Yep.
all the way up to the teen years.
well, the most important rule they will not understand till maybe 7 or 8, but the absolute most important rule is don't believe a damn thing you read on the internet, period, end of story. And the fact that people think the internet can influence voting and all this other stuff, okay, that's great, but the reality is that's the number one lesson for your kids. Just because it's on the internet doesn't make it true. And if you have to lighten it, say, believe the internet as much as you believe the graffiti in a rest area on Route 95, because that's the unfortunate reality for now, until we figure out how to have non-anonymous internet. So that's rule number one. And then don't believe what people say. I hate to say it. I don't want to have a paranoid environment, but it's the safest thing for your kids, is that when they're sharing with their friends at school, they fully know each other's Facebook logins. They know who they are before they start sharing. There is no random invite hurled over the fence and you just go, okay, you can look at my Facebook wall, or okay, you can look at this. Now, I know your children will use Facebook because it's like 80% now do. So I can give you another tip. Your children probably don't want you to see their Facebook page. If that's in fact the case, I had a friend who started a Facebook page for his dog, and all of his daughter's friends loved the dog, so they friended the dog's Facebook page, giving the parent all the access. Genius. So I pass you that tidbit. Start a Facebook page for your dog, get lots of cute pictures on it. That's what I'm doing. I'm sorry. I better start now, get the backdrop believable by the time my kids are old enough to believe it. But that's unfortunately rule number one. After that, I do believe the following. You want to keep your machine separate from your kids, because as your kids online game, and they will, that's one of the easiest ways to infect a computer. Russian organized crime figured this out a long time ago. And so if they're downloading games from the internet, whether they're paying for them or not, they're compromising that machine. And I don't know, you're not going to be able to prevent that from occurring, I don't think. You will want to keep that machine with the most current antivirus you can. It'll update itself. It can easily be circumvented. But look into, for those of you a little bit more advanced, think about the firewalls, because most products right now are antivirus and firewall, and you can make a PC only do web traffic, which is pretty good, because the bad guys want to do more than that, quite frankly. But they can just go to that protocol. But that'll also help. And then again, at the wireless access point, you have a crimp. You have an ability to monitor your children. They'll delete what they're doing on their computers, right? They'll say, remove my browsing history, and remove the cookies or the little crumbs that are left behind from the websites I visit. But they don't let them get to your wireless access. Unfortunately, most of you will say, oh, I can't get the VCR to work, but my kids can do it for me. This is one place where you don't want to punt. You're going to want to make sure you control that. Because at the wireless access point, you have surreptitious knowledge of everything people are doing in your home. I wouldn't give that up.
Good idea, even amongst adults, to have one machine for serious business and the other machine for fun?
Absolutely, absolutely. Separate them. And if you are I always say for the most senior officials, like I brief CEOs all the time, and they are absolutely spearphished all the time. one of the safest things you can do to protect yourself as a high-level official, high-level ranking officer, in theater, in command, wing commander. Open your email, your personal email, on an iPad or Android device, and it's a lot more secure right now than PCs. Or get a Mac. And I'm not pro any product, quite frankly, but right now no one's hacking Apples.
Because it's more difficult, or there were fewer of them, they're later to the game?
I think they're a little bit more difficult, but it is also because there's fewer of them. I don't believe they're unhackable. So the problem is, as everybody starts going to Mac, all we're doing is shifting what the bad guys are going to do. But at least, we'll create the higher
Right
cost.
now, their center of gravity is PCs.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Will this ever get better?
The day everyone who's born is a good person automatically, then it'll get better. But as long as there's a percentage of people that are tending to do the wrong things, no,
Okay,
it's not going to change.
but we made driving an automobile safer. All right, we changed the cultural
Right.
connection between drinking and driving. We raised the age, we imposed driver education, we made machines more safe, otherwise you couldn't sell them. We required people to wear seatbelts. I mean, is there a process here that we raise the water level of this? Again, I'm thinking this is a digital Somali
Sure.
up here
Right.
in the cyber domain, but can we make it better?
Oh, we can. I can tell you this, I'd rather get hacked than get in a car accident. so I'll listen to that legislation. But at the same time, we are getting better, especially both consumer-wise and in the private sector and in the government. Everybody's getting better at this. I mean, we're having discussions like this right now. 10 years ago, I'm not sure we would have had it. So people are more aware. We have a much more tech-savvy, tech-aware youth growing up right now, and it's just the way it is. So I think the security watermark, as you call it, is going up. We're getting better. I don't yet know how to legislate, how to fix it, because to me it's like legislating, hey, cure cancer. Let's legislate that, because I want a cure for cancer. I believe in cyber, the issues are sometimes that complex. I've been doing this 20 years, and I've seen networks where somebody said, you need to secure this in 6 months. I just sit there and go, I don't want that job. so it's hard to do right now, and that's just the state of it. I mean, because humans are the vulnerability, I don't see a fix 100%. That being said, we're all getting better and more aware.
Okay. When we've done this before, you've asked me to come talk to your
Sure.
folks. One final question. I make the point that down here, land and sea, we do have a pretty robust expectation of government to defend us. Otherwise, we'd all be packing here in downtown. But that's not happening up here. Is this going to, the line I use, and you confirm or deny, is the next sound you hear is not the digital bugle and the digital cavalry coming over the ridgeline to save us. That this is not baked in, that the government, as government,
Yeah.
is going to progress the way you suggest we might progress, which means it leaves it to folks like this and frankly, companies like you. True?
Well, I think so. And by the way, I have 5 questions for him. But the problem we have is, where does the government stop and the private sector take over? I mean, you always did this, so I'm imitating you now. Do you want the government searching your cell phones? I mean, because cyber attacks will hit this. Cyber attacks will hit our homes. So there's only so much the government can do. There's only so much our people want our government to do. And I'll give you a quick example. There was, I know a bunch of companies that were being targeted by Chinese hackers where these companies couldn't stop the attack. And the US government probably could, quite frankly. The US government had the knowledge, capability, and at one point the US government said, one entity in the DoD said, do you want us to notify you when these attacks occur? Day one, every commercial entity said, oh, that sounds great. By day 2, every one of those hands that was up saying, yeah, government, come help us, actually came down. And it's because of some of the privacy issues. It's just, when some of these companies looked at, we have 300,000 employees, and the government's going to start monitoring everything to protect us, but in the charter of monitoring everything, they see everything. It was just a weird response, but the bottom line is it showed me the private sector doesn't necessarily want the government coming all the way to our cell phones every day. And there's an interesting balance there. So it's a tough one.
You mentioned a Chinese attack. A few words about APT-1 and your white paper in that building in Shanghai?
I'm still debating if I'm glad I wrote that paper or
I
not.
was going to ask you that.
Let's put that out
You're
there.
familiar, this is a paper that Kevin's company wrote, came out in March.
It was February 19th-ish.
Front page of the New York Times on a Monday morning really energized the U.S. government to make Chinese cyber behavior a key part of Sino-American relations and negotiations. So what was the response you got from that?
Well, I can tell you why we did it, is that the Chinese government, it just felt very unfair to have people in uniform, and they are in uniform, show up every day to work, and then hack companies that make the products we use. It's an unfair fight. It's like an ultimate fighting champion training and attacking my grandmother. It's not going to look pretty at the end. So we wanted to do something, and then what did it was the President's State of the Union in early February, where the State of the Union went, we need to do something about gun control because of the events in Connecticut. And then we got to get more jobs because every State of the Union says more jobs. But the third point was, and then we have to do something about the cyber espionage. And I think that was absolutely the final straw. Technically, we cannot stop these attacks right now. That's simply where we're at. We can't stop them. I think academically we can come up with, yes, we can. But operationally and in the real world, we can't stop these attacks. That being said, we tried it to see if there's a non-technical answer. We released this paper. And I don't think there's a non-technical answer either. Quite frankly, I'm a technician. I'd rather address the technical problems to the challenge than the non-technical
But the white
ones.
paper did put the issue there, and absent Snowden's leaking, all right, Snowden leaked alleged NSA activity against China about 2 or 3 days before our president was going to confront the new Chinese president, Xi Jinping, with Chinese cyber behavior. And of course, that just took all the air right out of the balloon. The Chinese claimed equivalency.
No way.
And we're back where we are. And it's not equivalent, right?
Well, I think we should just respond the same way they do. That is groundless and unprofessional to accuse us.
Okay.
So,
All righty. Well, listen, thank you very much for your attention, but I suspect and I'm fairly confident that what some of the things Kevin has pointed out generated some questions. So why don't we go to those?
For those of you who have questions, if you want to go ahead and write them down on cue cards, we'll come by and pick them up. And in the meantime, we've had quite a few questions come in online. The first one that I'd like to ask is, how safe is it to enroll in the auto pay feature that credit card companies use? They are convenient for me, but I'm concerned about safeguarding my bank information in the credit card company's server.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I got an easy one on this. I think everybody heard the question. In my opinion, from a security standpoint, security burden's on the banks, and even if something bad did happen, you're not going to be held accountable to it. I mean, what I've observed is, well, I'll skip that point. It's safe. Go ahead and do that on a reputable bank and most of the retailers. You can let them keep your credit card data because you're not going to feel the loss. Now, you may have to get a new credit card issued to you when there's a compromise, but from a dollar perspective or damage to you perspective, you will not have one. That's my
But
opinion.
you've got a hygiene responsibility, right?
Right, absolutely.
You've got to have a complex password and, right.
I know that Captain Tortora from the U.S. Navy Academy, he had sent in a question earlier.
Hi, sir. Paul Tortora, the director of the Naval Academy's new Cyber Center. Regarding education, so key to my current job, educating the midshipmen on cyber awareness, how would we educate those before they get to colleges and those that are home at the home front as a sailor with family back home and I'm overseas? How should we educate them as they grow up, the teens, the young, and the spouses? What you said, Mr. Mannion, is what I do with my kids as well, how I train them. But how do we do that collectively for the families?
Yeah. It has to be a national effort. We have changed cultures, all right? I mean, we can change group behaviors. I mentioned one example earlier with regard to drinking and driving. Again, it was always stupid, but I'm old enough to remember when it was still socially acceptable. And there's some reality there with regard to smoking as well. And so, to badly mix my metaphors here, we need something like Smokey the Bear. You know, we did end up with fewer forest fires because we had a consistent, reasonably well thought out, targeting from the youngest age forward campaign to actually make people alert to dangers. Janine and I he's now 4, but before he was 2, our grandson, his mom was giving birth to his new baby sister we were watching him. He's 20 months old, 21 months old. Cell phone lights up in the restaurant. There's his mom and his new baby sister. We hand this to him. He looks at it and goes, okay. I mean, before he's 2 years old, he's beginning to acquire the mechanics. And so what should he, I mean, what's the education level there, and at age 4 and at age 6? And it's beyond not turning your kid's computer into a member of a botnet. It's protecting your child from predators and all sorts of things. So I am hopeful that as we now have a generation of digital natives, rather than immigrants like all the rest of us, that we begin to bake in just routine practices for security, and we make it better. And I think it has to be a controlled curriculum. Well, when Kevin and I do this to DHS, they'll go, oh, yeah, we got a program. And they'll pull something off the shelf, and it's in a binder, and they do, all right? But it's not nearly where it needs to be or as pervasive as it needs to be. And it's got to be some of those 15 and 30-second spots that networks run as public service things. And so it just becomes part of the culture. We're just not there yet. I mean, have any of you ever visited a country with first-generation drivers?
No.
That's us. That's us on the internet. We are all first-generation drivers.
All right,
A positive note on that too, though. Having spent almost 15 years of my career training the FBI, it is so hard to commit cybercrime in this country, get away with it. So we are a protect your children culture. We're doing that right now. You're seeing some of the response to cyberbullying and the suicides that happened. I see an unbelievable heightened diligence in this country to do something. And I also see the training of security getting into the elementary schools right now. The problem is, I'm not sure there's top-down organization of it, but that's tough to do. But I'm seeing third graders and fourth graders using iPads and learning how to communicate online at that age already. So I think people are going to somehow, I think we're the last generation that will be uncomfortable with a faceless environment. And somehow the next generation will be okay communicating in more of a faceless way. And how we transverse that, that's going to be my kids' problem. No, I'm just kidding. We'll try our best.
Cheryl Roberson had submitted a question by email.
Thank you so much for being here today. My question is, my husband's active duty, and like you said, the military is quite good at making sure their computers stay safe with the most up-to-date virus software, et cetera. So at our home computer, how do I, there's McAfee, there's Norton, there's so many different choices. There's the free download for anti-spyware software. Do you need the firewall? Do you need the internet piece that watches those things? How do you know which ones are the best, and is there a recommendation that you could give to keep our home computers safe in the same way?
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Buy one and get the AV and the firewall package. So there's a Norton security package that's AV and firewall and spyware. McAfee has a competing one. You're just fine going into Best Buy, picking the box and doing it. It'll update itself online after that, or you can download it. But I would buy before I'd take free, because there's just too many options that are free. Which one's the best? Don't worry about that, because it's a sine wave. At any given time, a different AV is slightly ahead of the others. It's immaterial, just as long as you have one of those. Kaspersky's good. Anything in a box, quite frankly. It's got a box. It's a real company. It's got to be good. I used to recommend Norton Security, but anyway, which is Symantec.
Hi, I'm Alan Carswell. I'm chair of the Cybersecurity and Information Assurance Department at University of Maryland, University College. My question has to do with the term Cyber Pearl Harbor. I hear all these predictions, dire predictions about a catastrophic event that's going to affect everybody in very bad ways, all the way up to life-threatening. My question is that a realistic scenario, or is it more likely that will be a series of smaller scale events that will really be more a matter of inconvenience as opposed to life-threatening?
Yeah, it's real enough, but, all right? And I don't say that. Secretary Panetta, actually after your white paper and APT1 and Shanghai, and so on. It became a pretty powerful flavor of the month inside the federal government. Tom Donilon went up to New York, the National Security Advisor, made a pretty powerful speech about Chinese cyber behavior. Leon Panetta, before he left the Secretary of Defense job, gave a speech on the Intrepid up in the Hudson River to, I think, business executives for national security, and talked about, and the next Pearl Harbor will be a cyber Pearl Harbor. I don't say that. I don't argue about his saying that, but I don't say it because I can't explain to you why it hasn't happened. I mean, I think our vulnerabilities are such that there are sufficient evildoers out there that this domain is sufficiently inherently unstable, all right, that it could have happened. And the fact that it hasn't, I can't explain. I cannot give you a concrete example of a cyber terrorist attack, even low scale. And these guys aren't cyber stupid. They use the net to recruit, train, gain finances, proselytize, pass operational orders. They're actually quite sophisticated, but no attack. Janine and I went to National Geographic about 3 weeks ago. They had it was a preview of a movie they ran the following Sunday called Blackout America. And it was an apocalyptic view of America after a cyber attack with all the power going out. And they had people like me on the board, I mean, not just me, but other people on the panel afterwards. And every one of us began by saying, well, that's overly dramatized. Okay? So I don't think we're predicting that. Now, that said, there are vulnerabilities, and really bad things could happen. The two industries that are, and Kevin, jump in here to elaborate, the two industries who are most seized of the cyber danger right now should be, one is energy, and the other is financial services, because both of them require maximum interface in order to work, and we rely on both of them practically every moment we breathe. And so they really have worked very, very hard. But the most we've seen against banks, and it's not an absolute statement, but in general, the worst we've seen against banks are the DDoS attacks that Kevin mentioned. And it was Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo. I talked to the security officer at one of the banks. He said on a normal day, you get about 15,000 hits a minute between you and me, cashing a check, moving money, or checking our balance. At the height of the attacks, and they were Iranian, our government doesn't say so, they were Iranian, it was 3 million hits a minute, which clogged up the 911 line, and nobody's cashing a check or moving money. But that's pretty much what we've seen going after the financial sector. And so I'm reluctant to overly dramatize this, okay? But there are genuine dangers, and they are above the nuisance level that could be inflicted on us.
I would just opine as the group down at the bottom, this other category, ideologically different.
Yeah.
I think the first time they try to do an attack, it'll be a shot across the bow that might not work. And not to bore you, there's smart ways to try to shut down a utility and clumsy ways. I'm hoping they try the clumsy way first. And any company that responds to these types of intrusions all the time will recognize, hey, there's the shot across the bow. The second thing is when the nation states do it, we already have a kinetic problem, in my opinion.
Let me pile on there. If a nation state's doing this, this isn't the biggest problem we have. All right? We are at war with a near peer. All right? If that's going on. But to second Kevin's point, this third group, kind of the disaffected, the hacktivists, the activists, LulzSec, Anonymous, they're motivated by different things. All right? And they have demands that maybe you and I can't understand, and I'll bet you a whole bunch of you and I can never meet. And if they feel offended in kind of an ideological way, in a sense, an idealistic sort of way, all right? PayPal shuts off WikiLeaks after the Assange thing starts rolling, so you can't make contributions to WikiLeaks via PayPal. Anonymous goes after PayPal. Now, they go after them with DDoS, all right, which is about that much above spray painting a subway car, all right? But they can get more sophisticated. And so this group down here, as time goes by, does get more sophisticated. You know, the digital tide's coming in and all the boats are going up. They will get more and more capable they have fewer reasons to be constrained if they want to do something. They have fewer reasons to be concerned about retribution and consequences. They may have fewer reasons to be concerned about collateral damage. And they may have good reasons to go after a target simply because it's iconic, simply because it represents a world which they feel they don't have a stake in. And so, I mean, it's all a jumble. That's not a really good answer to your question, but no, I'm not here waving my arms about December 7th coming to the internet, but there's still some reason to fret.
And I often wonder, how would it actualize, having done penetration tests for a long time, if somebody said to me, hey, Kevin, try to bring down a utility, I think it's going to be hard to do. And I think that the challenge you will have is you'll never quite know as the attacker what fault tolerance we have. So you're not quite sure. You may get lucky. And as generators shut down in one town, it might just permeate, the load overloads the next town, and you get a whole blackout in the Northeast or something. But I don't think when we get this cyber attack, the bad guys are truly going to know how far-reaching it'll be. It'll be very automated. A lot of it will do the attack on its own, kind of like what Stuxnet did, propagating on its own to hurt centrifuges in Iran. It's going to be like that. And quite, well, never mind. I was about to give you all the good ideas I'd have, but I don't want them out there. Here's what I would do if I were attacking the U.S. Never mind. I'll withhold that. I'll let Life magazine publish it. Yeah, never mind. There's no way to pull it off.
No,
well, I don't want to bait anybody either.
Can't be done.
Can't be done. Oh, if they do, we'll know exactly who did it. We'll be knocking on their door in minutes.
Question that came in several forms was, what is the preferred method to use in crisis communication?
The one that works.
Walk.
You mean like when 9/11 happened and no one could get through?
It says with regard to internet methods or what tools.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's to make the best of bad choices. I mean, if you're an extremist, right? Sometimes you're an extremist, and the secure voice is down and the secure internet is down, you just get on the phone. You got to move the information. And so it's hard to project what's the best under the circumstances. Nothing's perfect, nothing's guaranteed, and the totality of the circumstances will dictate how much risk you're willing to embrace for what kind of outcome.
I can tell you, going back to September 11th, where we had an office in one of the towers and we didn't know who was making it and who wasn't, and no phones worked. I've always observed during times where bandwidth has been destroyed, text seems to be the blips that get through. I mean, I don't know if that's true, and there might be a science behind it, but you're talking tiny little kilobytes so it can get through. You're not going to, so if the phone call doesn't work, try texting. It'll probably be in the clear, but I've seen that's worked in, during times of disasters.
Can I just quickly go back to the question you asked, sir, about from Maryland about Cyber Pearl Harbor? Because Kevin and I were chatting about this. The declaratory American policy with regard to a very destructive cyber attack is that we will respond to an attack based upon its effects, not upon its means. And that puts a whole bunch of other pieces on the board. Kevin, you described it somewhat differently. If it's really bad, people with guns are going to show up, right?
I hope.
Yeah. And so the world needs to know, and it should, because we've made it absolute declaratory American policy. It's the effects of the attack, not its means. And we will use any tool we have to respond to an attack. And proportionality will be judged based upon the attack's effects, not because you just used a weapon comprised of ones and zeros.
Yes, good afternoon. Frank Cumberland, NMFA, also Air Force retired. Glad to see Air Force is leading the way today, so that gives me a lot of confidence. My question is about the use of cash for military families or just as a kind of an American consumer. We recently got the dreaded call from Visa that they had spotted some unusual charges that had been made, very, very random things, and somebody had got our Visa number and was using it. So they shut down the card very professionally and promptly, and all that went pretty smoothly, really. But it just made me wonder what your recommendations would be in terms of consumer behavior. Do you personally, pay cash when you go to a restaurant or a gas station, or a lot of the things that we do as we go through the day to kind of avoid that vulnerability and keep that down a bit? And when you pay the bills, you do a certain number online. Some people want to check do you avoid kind of ever putting an outgoing check in the mailbox on the way out, because that has so much information? So just want to run those two by kind of at the consumer level. Thank you.
All I know is I've had a reporter send me my personally identifiable information twice in the last 2 weeks. So meaning hackers keep getting my stuff and sending it out. So I get a new credit card all the time. I personally feel fine using, you got to figure what's worse, having a wad of cash in your pocket from a security standpoint, or no risk, just inconvenience of the credit card. Because if there is fraud on your card, you just get a new one and you're not going to be held accountable for the charges. That being said, I get my card shut off, and I'm not exaggerating, probably once every 10 days. It happens, but I travel every single day. So I trigger fraud all the time. And in a side hallway, I'll tell you exactly what's triggering the fraud alerts, even when it's not fraud. Nordstrom's, and if I buy something in Nordstrom's, boom. True story, it's absolute fact. Every time I go to Nordstrom's in a different city, it gets flagged for some reason. So, and there's a few other things. Buying gas quickly, 500 miles away, boom, it's happened. And it's different per bank. I have a Bank of America card and I have a Capital One card, and I can't, I kind of figured out the behaviors. Personally, I'll keep the credit card, not the cash, but a lot of it's because I travel international too. It's just simpler.
You raise a good point. In addition to cash or card, just think of all the digital exhaust you leave in just a 90-minute shopping trip. I got Bank of America, so I'll use a debit card. So I'll go to the gas station, I'll gas up, I'll go across Cambridge Road to the Giant. I'll let them swipe my Giant card because Lord knows I want that 4% discount on the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc I just bought. So now they have a complete record. A complete record of what I purchased is now part of my digital exhaust. And I'll swipe the card, and that's there. Janine and I went to Pittsburgh to watch the Steelers, and she made the comment, we're using Easy Pass all the way out of town and down the Pennsylvania Turnpike. The Europeans have a new movement, and again, European considerations of privacy are different than ours, and they're actually diverging. Okay, the Europeans think you have a right to be forgotten, and they're actually pushing that, trying to end the permanence of these, what's the right word, incidental records of your behavior.
Thanks. You had mentioned Skype being a secure method for military families to communicate. Google Hangouts, the same? I know a lot of military families use that tool as well.
I don't know either.
Don't know.
All right. Next question from the room. How effective a job are second and third tier defense companies at protecting their data?
Not as good as the first tier defense companies. That brings in a whole bunch of things. So Kevin and I here are whining about the Chinese attacking businesses, right? And we're right. It's an unfair fight. It's a nation state going after potentially a mom and pop. All right. On the other hand, if a mom and pop bends metal for the American Armed Forces, I'm willing to cut the Chinese some slack. That actually is a legitimate national security target. And so you've seen the Department of Defense over the last 2 years begin to expand the defensive perimeter. Okay, first of all, we kind of crowded the wagons around .mil and defended DOD. And then with something called the DIB pilot, the Defense Industrial Base pilot, we went after the big metal benders for the Department of Defense and kind of circled the wagons around them and got them into the defensive perimeter. Now that just sounds logical that you'd have Boeing and Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman kind of consider them part of the DoD family. And it is logical. And it took 2 years to do it, to hack through the legal underbrush, to begin to incorporate them in a defensive perimeter. To give you some sense as to why the government's not coming to the rescue, as Kevin said, you don't want the government in there, and there are a lot of legal and policy things that slow the government down providing security. The next step now is to go beyond the big lead system integrators, the kind I just mentioned, and go further out in the defense industrial base and the defense industrial base supply chain to secure it. But as you can probably tell in the retailing here, This is a very slow-moving process. And if I were attacking, and here I am giving tips to the other side, all right, you crawl up the supply chain. All right? You begin with the furthest point that whose relationship with the Department of Defense may or may not be obvious, and you work your way there through subcontractors to primes to where you want to go. Because each one of those links I just described, for business purposes, has to hug the IT of the next circle outside the center. And so when we advise companies, we say, okay, start with your subs, because you are as vulnerable as your weakest subcontractor is in terms of defending your own network.
From the room, the question is, do Apple and Microsoft software most military families have on their computers have the ability to screen the 4 types of email attachments Mr. Mandia indicated are the primary means of being compromised?
No. So there's going to be technologies that get better. Right now, the next generation of protection on the PCs is detect what antivirus missed, and that'll be coming up. But it's not commercially ready at this point.
So what he's saying is, it's up to you, all right? And you get that email from your daughter-in-law and says, check it out, awesome, and all you've got is a hyperlink. I just delete it right away.
What I'm saying is the intrusion, if you have your firewall set right, the intrusion will work, but the bad guy can't get anything out. That's how the consumer gets around this. The attack will work, but the bad guy doesn't even know it worked because there's a firewall blocking it. But and by the way, it generally works in a Windows environment. We're not seeing it happen as much in the Mac environment. Realize this, I'll leave you with this thought, it's kind of mind melting. If you get a Word document, any Office document or PDF document is the same as me handing you a hard drive. You can put anything in that thing. So that's why, in fairness to those companies, how do you secure a hard drive? There could be any file on it. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks.
So you get a Word document, think of it as I am getting a hard drive from somebody I don't know, and what can be on that hard drive, any type of file.
It's helpful.
It's true though,
Yeah.
they're file systems.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, that just prompted another question. So let's say I buy a thumb drive at the local Walmart, and it happens to be made in China. Do I need to worry about that thumb drive having something embedded before I put it in my computer?
I think you bring it home, get your electron microscope out, and our iPads are made in China, our refrigerators are made in China. Yeah,
It's because it's random, all right? I mean, they don't know that's you and you're buying it. And so let's think, since he's got problems with his credit card, obviously he's got a certain pronounced personality out there, all right? I will bet you that Kevin will not accept a thumb drive as a party favor to any dinner party he has been invited to. And I'm not being facetious here. Those have now become very convenient and valued gifts for people attending a conference and so on. So you get the thumb drive. Oh, cool! I could always use a thumb drive. Okay, if they know it's you, if there's any way that they could know it's you, or a probability of you, or a probability of people like you, throw it away.
Easier to just hack you through software than through hardware.
A question that we received from the room, or the criminal element seems to be increasing their use of ransomware. What is your advice to the military family whose computer is infected and held ransom? Do they pay the fee, send it out for a fix, or call Mandiant?
Don't call us because we'll tell you to go to Best Buys or something. But here's my answer to that. The majority of the time when you get a ransomware window, you're not currently infected. That there's a feature in your browser that can display that window, and your next action is what's actually going to put the ransomware on it. So the answer is it depends, and you don't want to call me because I'll give you a 45-minute step-by-step conversation as to how to get rid of it. But if you get to that window and do nothing, just shut the machine down, you'll be fine. That's probably over 90% of the time. It's when people go, oh, the ransomware got there. I need to click here to fix it now. It's that clicking here to fix the ransomware problem is what's actually hacking them. So be careful. That window, here's the challenge with all your browsers. That means whether you use Internet Explorer or Safari, whatever you happen to use, is that any website can present any window into your browser. It's that simple. And that's what the attackers have done. They've hacked the website and they're delivering a window to you. Don't click in it. That being said, if the ransomware really gets on there, trouble. I mean, I don't pay it, but I don't know what to say. There's too many variants. Yeah. I don't know if paying it's going to eliminate the problem, and I'm not familiar with anyone who's actually paid that.
A question that we received on our website. If we are globally moving in the direction of cyber warfare as a new way to wage war or another way to wage war, what will our military look like in the years to come?
In a way that both reflects strength and weaknesses of our society, we could be fairly accused of being the thought leaders when it comes to the military use of cyberspace. Now, before that sounds too judgmental, we can fairly be accused of it because we're an open society and we talk about it. There are other societies who are doing this, Chinese, if you read Chinese military doctrine, Chinese military journals on cyber war, they're tremendously sophisticated, all right? But we talk about it in the public square. And therefore, we are kind of associated with, we created Cyber Command, didn't we? We're the ones to first create a military force to, and the words are, no fooling, dominate cyberspace. To use it for our purposes when we want to and deny its use to others when we so wish that, right? And so I guess the other thought I'd offer you is that in American military thought, you don't create a command to do something unless you believe that command could actually be the decisive movement in a battle. Let me retrace that again, all right? You've got a main body and you have supporting arms, okay? By the very fact that we've created a cyber command, we have embraced the doctrinal belief that the main effort could, in some conflicts, be the cyber effort. And the other efforts are supportive. Now, I think it's self-evident that cyber can always be supportive of the others. But when you elevate it to command status in our kind of military thinking, you may not be planning this, but you're at least open to the possibility that this domain is so important that that's the main effort, and everyone else is going to be supporting of the cyber movement. Now, that said, the better angels of our nature are trying to negotiate international norms with regard to cyberspace so that we don't turn this into Texas west of the Pecos, all right? And there's just a totally lawless region. But that's a work in progress. And right now, the UN last year, with American support, agreed that the laws of armed conflict down here apply up here. And so principles of distinction, civilian, military, principles of proportionality, all right, that you don't create excess collateral damage, principles of legitimate targeting, that it is a genuine military target, and all those internationally now, we agree, apply up here. But the fact that you had to have a meeting, the fact that you had to take 5 or 6 years to get agreement on that suggests we're in the very early stages of thinking about what combat looks like up here and what laws of conflict apply up here.
Like we have time for 2 more questions. So the next question from the room, with almost every facet of our lives being digitized, medical records and et cetera, how can we maintain some sense of control over our privacy and our safety?
See, I want to punt to you and you want to punt to me.
Good luck.
Yeah.
No, we have surrendered knowledge about ourselves for convenience. This Snowden thing and all that grand debate, I was up there at American Enterprise Institute, just kind of up the street here, in a panel about 2 months ago. It was a good panel. We had a ACLU guy and a DOJ guy, and had me, and we're in a scrum there about privacy and security and the rule of law and how far can the government go. Okay, great. We got all done. I go down, get into my Uber vehicle that I just done, sit in the back seat of the Uber vehicle, go check my email like we all do, and bing, the email that came in on top was from Groupon. It was 6:15 in the evening. It said, "You must be hungry," and then gave me a 20% discount for a restaurant I could see through the windscreen of the car. Okay? And so this horse may be long gone out of the corral here.
Mr. Mandia, I'm going to leave the last question for you to ask General Hayden something that you'd like to get.
That's it. Well, here it is then.
All right.
I'm going to skip. I will go to a semi-softball, but what is the worst thing that could happen in cyberspace if you had to extrapolate it?
Okay.
Since
So-
you punted on the privacy one.
Yeah, right.
I'll go back to the damage one.
I could go to, catastrophic damage and all the lights go out, or even worse, all the ATM machines shut down. Okay, and we're a cashless society in the literal meaning of the word. All right. But let me come at it from another way. Okay. And this is not about destruction. It's about an alternative future. Okay. Internet's a wonderful thing, and it's quintessentially American. I think when we're in the Army-Navy Club in 500 years, and we got somebody here doing a lecture, and he mentions the United States, somebody in the third or fourth row is going, United States, United States, United States. Oh, yeah. The internet guys. Okay? This may be the thing by which our society is remembered, the way the Romans are remembered for roads and aqueducts and so on. I mean, it's created linkages now that are used by succeeding generations for centuries. Okay? And the character of this internet is, number one, it is ubiquitous, it is egalitarian, it trends towards democracy, it is unitary, it is equally accessible, and whether you drive into it from the Ukraine or from Kansas, it's the same. Okay? And I actually think that's a wondrous economic, cultural, and technological achievement. Because of the things we're talking about here, because of cyber theft, because of other nations, they're not afraid about the theft of intellectual property. In fact, they steal intellectual property. What they're afraid about is the ubiquity of a global unitary internet that allows their citizens to commute to information they'd rather not have the ability to commute to. There are countries out there who want to impose up here the same kind of restrictions you and I have become accustomed to down here. Eric Schmidt of Google wrote a book last year with a fellow named Jared Cohen. I think it's called The Digital Age. In any event, he talks about a future where we could actually have imposed on us digital passports and digital visas. And a digital visa, I don't mean like what I did 2 weeks ago to go online and get a visa so I can go to Australia in early December. I'm talking about you've got to have a visa to commute, a visa from a sovereign to commute to their domain on the internet so they know who's there, what they're doing, and how long they remain. We have already begun to see digital residency requirements moving in. As a partial result of this Snowden thing, you've got countries now insisting that cloud service providers guarantee that the servers on which their information will be held will be physically in their sovereign space and not just out there in this World Wide Web. That is a trend line that destroys that which we currently have. And the really dark story is that we've actually been pretty good stewards of that. Okay, now I realize our stewardship is kind of, the sun's not quite setting on it, but our hand is becoming less forceful in the governance of the web. But we've actually been good stewards about this ubiquitous, egalitarian, unitary, accessible, democratic, worldwide system. And unfortunately, one of the dark sides of the allegations of people like Snowden, all right, will be to accelerate those who, for other purposes, like the Chinese and the Russians, want to break up the internet because they fear the very essence of what the net is. So if you're looking, I understand.
That was the answer I actually wanted.
Okay,
Wrong
good.
question.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more?
Sure.
It's a yes or no, which is kind of
Okay.
nice. Are we going to have more privacy or less privacy on the internet? Let me ask it this way. Will anonymity go up or down in the future on the internet?
Let me do the privacy one because I understand it better.
Okay.
We'll have less privacy before we get more.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I figured.
Okay? But we'll figure it out. I mean, okay, one more spin of the wheel. I mean, we got, remember Kevin said, you got a business computer over here, you got a computer for fun over here. We can actually extend that to the web. I mean, I remember I said this is Texas west of the Pecos. Why is that? Because you build it that way. Well, we built it. We could build another one. I use the analogy, very extended, and all analogies break down, so forgive me. But think of your visit to London 20 or 30 years ago, and when you went to Soho then, okay? Theater, dance, music, food, wine, prostitution, petty theft. I mean, it had all the licentiousness that seems to come along with an emphasis on freedom and creativity. And then you go to other parts of London, the houses were gated, the streets were well lit, they weren't really interesting, but they were very safe. I can envision a future in which all those who still want to violate their own privacy on Facebook and go anywhere they want get to live on the internet kind of like the one we have. And when we've got this other one that not everyone can get to, may cost you to join, it's got inherent latency because it's got a bunch more security on it, probably uses double or triple factor authentication before you can go there. So it's not as much fun and it takes longer, but your money's safe. And I actually can picture a world in which we all don't have to live on the same kind of net, that we can actually zone it to be different. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking.
I'm done with my question.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to ask you all to help me thank General Hayden and Mr. Amandia for sharing their thoughts. Thanks also for your tips on how we might prevent some possible security risks in our own homes with our families. Appreciate that as well. One thing I think is certain is whatever warfare confronts us in the future, it's likely to be a combination of land and cyber force, but the military will be a key player, and that means military families will be involved. So I think our work continues for a long time to come. If you, viewing this, enjoyed our discussion and would like to consider sponsoring a discussion like this in the future, please get in touch with us. Our objective in this discussion is to present you with the best possible information from experts like General Hayden and Mr. Mandia, and to present it in the most effective way so as to reach the most military families that we can. I'd like to ask you again to thank these gentlemen for their wonderful presentation. And with that, you've given us a great deal to think about. And with that, we will end the discussion portion of our leadership event. We will move into